Excellent, ladies and gentlemen. Hi, Iryna. Very nice to hear from you.
Same.
I just want to thank you first of all for joining us, and I want to also thank you, Susanna and Spring, for helping out with arranging it as well. So, for anybody who's not listening quite yet, just a bit of housekeeping announcements. We're joined by Iryna Shev, who's a Ukrainian-born Portuguese journalist and, as of more recently, war reporter. If you'd all be so kind as to share and retweet the space, tag Iryna, tag some other people in it as well, that'd be greatly appreciated so we get as wide an audience as possible. Iryna, would it be all right with you if you wanted to introduce yourself, because you know yourself a lot better than I do, for a start?
Hi to everybody. Thanks for the invitation. I really hope I can give you some interesting information or insight of my experience in Ukraine for the last 4 months, or even for even before that, since I have been watching and writing and working and learning about Ukraine since I was a child, because I was born in Ukraine in 1991. So I am very proud to say that I'm the same age as the country that I was born in. And in the end of the 90s, my parents came to Portugal. They have a pretty common history of migration from the West Ukrainians to the European countries in the end of the 90s because of the very frustrating moments that Ukraine was living back then. Obviously, completely different from what's going on now, but also not very comfortable country, comfortable ambience to live in. So yes, my parents left the country, and they had this thing in mind, and I think it's pretty common as well, that they would go away for a while and then come back to help to rebuild the country and the economy. But that never happened because it was always really hard to work in Ukraine if you don't have like some kind of connections or some kind of big capital, so you can start on something. So my parents stayed in Portugal. My brother and me, we were practically raised in Portugal, but we always heard many stories about Ukraine, and we were always very curious to know what was going on there and how everything was, how the present moments that we were living were or could be explained by the history, because it was and it is a very particular country with a very particular history. And since I gained my financial independence, we can say that I was always traveling to Ukraine. And when I was studying journalism, that was when the Maidan revolution happened, and I was there kind of by accident, because I bought the tickets to go there in January before knowing about the revolution, obviously. Otherwise, it would be probably much harder to get there, since I was still living with my parents, so they still had a saying in it. But I had the tickets and I went, and I can say that it was one of the most incredible experiences of my life, because we hear a lot about revolutions, we study revolutions, but to live and to experience a revolution like that in your own skin is a completely revolutionary experience for your existence, because you see how everything comes to be. I mean, there were a lot of stories saying that United States were behind the revolution, and a lot of stories that were taking away the power of the Ukrainian people, to say that they could not have the strength to go out by themselves to fight for their rights and for their freedom. So somebody had to be behind it, because obviously United States and Russia, they were always they were always doing that.
Iryna, I think you can hear us now. If you'd be so kind as to jump back up, click that request button in the bottom left corner of your screen, because you had a technical difficulty by where we could no longer hear you.
Hi.
Here we go.
Yeah?
Hi. You cut off just as you were starting to describe the Maidan, and actually being on the Maidan and witnessing the revolution.
Okay.
Sorry, there's an occasional technical difficulty.
Okay.
Welcome to the.
Okay. I can do it again, I think. So I've been talking to myself for the past minutes, right?
No, just the last 30 seconds or so.
Okay, not that bad. I was saying that I was kind of impressed because in that revolution, I noticed the gap of generations, right? So you had like these old ladies everywhere, and they were giving sandwiches and hot tea to everybody. Then you had like people in their 20s, teenagers, and in their 30s. But then the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, I would say, they were not there. People of those ages were the minority over there in that revolution. So it made me think about, okay, so why is it like that? Why do older people are there? They are not afraid. Younger people are also very passionate about all it, and those middle ages, they were not there. So I think, well, it's pretty obvious that it has to do with the history of the Soviet Union and the power of that over the minds of people, right? So the older people, they still know very, very well the worst part of the Soviet Union, the repressions and all of that, and they know how it was like to fight for the freedom, and they knew what freedom felt, kind of, right? So they were not afraid to fight for it. Then you had the new generations, really, really open-minded, really wanting to be more like their colleagues from Europe and stuff, because everybody travels, everybody knows everybody everywhere, internet. And the people of 40, 50, and 60, I would say, they were so used to that system, to the corruption and all of that. So they were not there, right? And somehow I think you can also see that you can see that consequences of that period, of those generations, in the world that we are living nowadays. Does it make sense to you?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Iryna. So scrolling forward to 2022, you're already in Ukraine when the full-scale Russian invasion broke out. You were there for a few weeks before that. Did you foresee the war already when you got to Ukraine earlier in the winter, or did you think that it was just not going to happen, that it was going to be just like the year before? There's going to be this amassing of troops in Belarus and Russia, but it's all going to be a big pile of nothing like it was the year before.
You know, usually before I went to Ukraine in February, in the first days of February, I was feeling the tension. I was reading a lot about it, always wanting to know more and more and more. So I thought that the war was going to happen. I thought that the probability of the war was more was higher before I went to Ukraine, because when I went to Ukraine, and this happens because it's a psychological thing, right? So you go, you read a lot about something, you study a lot about something, and you have one perspective. But then when you go to that place, when you interact with local people, when you feel what they are feeling, when you exchange experiences, you change completely your state of mind, luckily, right? So what happened to me was that I thought that, yes, the war might happen. It's really, really probable that it will. But when I got there, everybody was so chilled. Like, people were making fun of you if you talked a lot about okay, so what will you do if the war starts? What are you preparing something? Are you going to run? Are you going to fight? People were not, most of people, obviously not all of them, but I would say that 95% of the people that I talked to in those weeks, in 3 weeks that I was there before the war started, they all said to me that they did not believe that the war would start, and for different reasons. Some thought that it was a political game between America and Russia. Others thought that it was impossible for something like that to happen because a lot of people, and I say that I don't agree with it, but as a journalist, I am obliged to say what really happened and what I hear, right? So people used to say that they did not believe that the war would happen because Russia and Ukraine are like a brother and a sister or whatever. I really don't like that expression, but a lot of people from those generations, right, from 40, 50 and 60 years old, they would always say stuff like that. Like, no, everything is okay. It's just some political stuff. Nothing will happen, blah, blah, blah. They will never like try to kill us, knowing that they were already killing them since 2014. But since all these people that I talked to was in Kharkiv or in Kiev, they were kind of away from the war. They were away from the front lines. And it was, and the feeling in Ukraine back then was that the war was really a thing that was really, really far. So we had this war for 8 years, but it was still very far for the people that lived in Kiev or in Lviv or even in Kharkiv.
So would you say that even those who expected maybe a hot war again, right, or an expansion of the war that has been slowly simmering for 8 years in Donetsk and Luhansk, were people mostly expecting that that's going to just get hotter again, and there being a hotter war in Donetsk and Luhansk, but not elsewhere in the country as it eventually was?
Yes, I would say that the feeling was the war is going on and it will be hotter in Donbass, but it's never going to get to other places in Ukraine. And even in Donbass, never nobody told me that, yeah, I'm really scared that Donbass will really get like very, very hot or something. No, it's like it was normal because it was far. Because even for the Ukrainians, knowing that the war was in their country, right there, it was not a really present thing. It's weird because you go to Ukraine. If you went to Ukraine before 2022, you would never feel that the country had a war going on. It happens. I would say that it happens now as well. If you go to Kiev or something, you don't, right now at this moment, you don't feel that the war is going on. Or in Odessa, usually like people are living their lives in the best way that they can. They have their issues. They still want to get to know other people. They want to get, I don't know, buy stuff and flirt or even, go on dates and stuff like that. So I think that right now it's a coping mechanism, obviously, and it also depends on different regions of Ukraine. But I think it's very interesting to understand how this coping mechanism works as well. And us as journalists, it's really hard to pass that feeling on, because it's one of the things that I really worry about is how can we make the people not forget what's happening in Ukraine. Because it's really hard. It's really, people get tired of bad things.
And let's go to the 24th of February, right? You're in Ukraine, morning of the 24th of February. Where are you? What do you do? What's your first initial response?
I wake up at my hotel in my room. I hear the wake up from the hotel. Everybody was woken up by the sirens inside the hotel, not the exterior ones, but inside the hotel, saying that there was a fire. Obviously, there was not a fire, but they did not have prepared an audio saying that the war has started. And I remember waking up. It was still dark outside, looking at my phone and seeing like 20 missed calls or something like that. And I immediately knew that, okay, so it has started. Because the night before, there were already a lot of rumors saying that, okay, guys, this is serious. Tonight is the night. And I remember that I was with my colleagues, Portuguese colleagues. Also, we were at the same hotel, four people, and I remember that we looked at each other, and we drank a shot of vodka, because we were like, okay, if it's not tonight, it's not going to happen. So let's just drink tonight, one shot of vodka, and go to sleep, because tomorrow is another day, and we don't know what's going to happen. And we did it. And went to sleep and woke up with that terrible, terrible news that it had started. And I remember the lights were off, and I remember looking at out of the window and already seeing some people with bags, putting bags inside the cars and stuff like that, and already leaving Kyiv. And well, I was working, right? So my first reaction was like, I need to put money and some, like, my toothbrush and stuff like that in my backpack, put it on my backpack and go wake up my colleague, and we need to go to work, right? So it started, so we cannot not talk about it. So I remember going to my colleague's room and knocking on his door. He opened the door. He had one eye closed yet. He was looking like he just woke up. He was having no clue what was going on. And I told him it has started. And
those
he
first
was like,
days,
okay, let's do this.
So those first days, the first week of the war, how were you able to operate? What were you working with? What were you working on in the very first days? You were still in Kyiv throughout that time, I presume.
Yeah, it was really hard because personally, I had no idea what were the rules of war. Like, where could you go? Who could you talk to? What could you film? You had the basic ideas, but it was my first time working on a scenario like that. So we would be really careful and trying to observe as maximum as we could, so we could do the best that we could to show what was going on, but not to make it bad for the Ukrainian army and stuff like that, because we would see people getting munitions and stuff, and we knew that, okay, if we show this on television, it will not be good for them. So we were trying to say as much as we could without doing that, because it's also it's very hard to do journalism in war times because of that, because there are a lot of things that you need to think about before you show it. And it happened in those first days. We were seeing columns of cars from the army passing through, and we were deciding if we would show it or not show it, or talk about it or not talk about it. But it was really impressive to go outside. And like the night before, it was a lot of people. Kyiv is a great, beautiful city with a lot of musicians on the streets, with a lot of different stores and coffee shops. It's a very hipster city. It has a lot of life. And suddenly it was all gone. So you had like these queues for the pharmacy, the bank, and the supermarkets, the ones that were open by that time. And I remember that we were walking, and then we felt the first explosions, like 3 kilometers from us. There was this explosion in Kyiv, and I remember feeling it coming from the ground, and it was the first time that I felt a bomb. And it was not near me, obviously. It's 3 kilometers is a long way, but still, it's impressive how it affects you and how you feel it. So yeah, we were trying to get as much information as we could, talking to people to understand what everybody was feeling and what everybody was going to do. And the panic was real. People were really, really scared, because I think somehow they felt that they were naive because they thought that it was not going to happen, and it did. They were trusting that Russia would not invade, that they were not going to kill somebody who is so similar to them.
What was your first report to camera after the war had started?
It was a live report, right, just outside the hotel. I remember that I just talked about. We didn't have that many information, right? So when you don't have a lot of information, it's best if you talk about what's going on just around you. So I remember that I was talking about what was happening around me. What were the people? What were the people saying to me? Where were they going? What were the orders that we got? So I remember describing all that and really trying to understand what were the next step. And it was really interesting to see the evolution of all that, because you get used to it and you already know how to operate, and it's right now, you go right now to war if you already kind of used to working in that areas. It's pretty obvious what you need to do, what you need to show and stuff like that, but at the beginning it was really, really complicated. And I remember that we could not go very far because we didn't even had our bulletproof vests. Me and my colleague, we had a microphone and a camera. We didn't have anything else. So we were staying, basically we would go out to Maidan and the center, and that for like 1 hour or 2 or 3 maximum, and then come back and do the reporting based in the hotel or near the hotel. During the nights, for example, we needed to have live on TV, and we could not go out because of the mandatory hours, right? So we had to try to show what was going on with the stories, with the people that were there with us. And I think that's what mattered the most, like the stories of the people that you have near you.
How long was it before you left Kiev after the start of the war?
We stayed for a week. So it was not that long ago, but it was long enough to feel the beginning of the war, and to understand how people feel in that situation. So it was not that long. But the first time we tried to leave by train, but it was impossible, obviously, because it was so dramatical, the situation. Everybody was trying to leave, and we just decided that we were not going to take space in the train, knowing that they were like women and children and old people that wanted to get away. So we came back and we stayed at the parking lot of the hotel where we were leaving, but the hotel was closing, so we had nowhere to go. So we really needed to go away, because what would we do in the middle of the street, right? And so we had a diplomatic car. The embassy of Portugal arranged it, and they drove us out of Ukraine. And then I came to Portugal. I stayed here, and I realized how mentality changed, right? So I realized that the war was not only affecting Ukraine and the nearby countries, it was also affecting countries as far from Ukraine as Portugal, right? So it's like the farthest country in Europe from Ukraine. People here were very, very upset with what was going on and is going on, and everybody was arranging groups of cars and vans to go to Poland or Romania to bring people here. The social network was working really, really good. Everybody was trying to help, getting money together, supplies, but it also has changed, obviously, because in the beginning people thought that it was not going to last that long. People thought, yeah, we will open our houses and people will come here, stay for a month maximum, and then leave. And right now it's not happening. So right now you have the opposite, and it also scares me really, really much, because the war is not going to end soon, as we all know it. And a lot of people, Ukrainian refugees that are in Portugal, that I know of, they need to find new places like every month, because nobody wants to keep them anymore. The social security is really, really bad. Like, I think one refugee one Ukrainian refugee here receives 189, so 189 euros. And so you can understand, one apartment in Lisbon with 2 rooms is like 1,000 euros. So it's a really complicated issue right now. So that's why I think journalism is also even more important right now, to make people not treat refugees like others, and not think about Ukrainian like it's far, they are different, they are like others in the real sense of the word. They are not us, they are something different. And I think that we need to rethink how we talk about Ukraine, how we talk about war, how we talk about what's happening because of that. Because the way that journalism works on this matter, it influences the way that the Ukrainians are treated everywhere in the world. So I would like to... I think about it because of my reporting. I know that I made a lot of mistakes that I would like to not make anymore, and I can talk more about it. I don't know if it's interesting to you or not, so please let me know, Dalman.
Let's do exactly as you said, and let's go back to your job as a war reporter, right? You went to Portugal, and then you went back to Ukraine. You went all over Ukraine. You went to Odessa. You went, I'm guessing, back to Kiev, to Kharkiv. You went to the JFO, the Joint Forces Operation in Donbass. I'll ask you one last question before I let some other people ask questions as well. How did your job as a war reporter differ in all of those places? And do you have any really illuminating examples from the different places that you were reporting from across Ukraine at various times on the war?
Yeah. Okay. So it's a very interesting exercise, Dalman. I know that, for example, in Odessa, since there were fortunately not that many bombings and tragedies, it was really hard to talk about war in the sense that you are used to, right? So you turn on the television and you see people crying, buildings destroyed, and stuff like that. And in Odessa, it was not possible to do that, right? So, and this is, I think, I'm thinking about it when I want to say that when I went there for the first time, right, I had in my mind everything that I was used to see on television, and how I was used to see my colleagues work, right, like older people and stuff like that. So I was used to seeing that. And in Odessa, it was not possible. So I felt, okay, what can I do to talk about war? Or what can I do to talk about Ukraine, right? So, because you do not need always to show destroyed things and people crying, blah, blah, blah. So in Odessa, I remember that, for example, I did a story about tourism. So I tried to show Odessa, I tried to show its beautiful places and to talk about Ukraine. I tried to make people understand that it's not only the sad part, you also have beauty in the middle of all this. That's in Odessa, because it was possible to do that there, right? Because in Mykolaiv, for instance, which is right next to Odessa, it's not like that at all. You have a city that's being shelled every day. So the story there is completely different. You talk about actually how it interferes in people's life, and really about the destruction and all of that. In Kiev, I would do more the reconstruction part the last couple of months, right? Because people are trying to get their homes back and trying to reconstruct everything. And it's the same in the Sumy region. Although Sumy region, we are also always hearing that Sumy is being attacked and bombed and stuff like that. But the thing about Ukraine is that regions are very, very big. So when you hear that some region is being attacked, you automatically think that it's the center, but it's not. In even in one region, you have completely different realities, because in Sumy region, the center, the Sumy city itself, it was intact. It was perfect. Everybody was having their normal lives. The normality is not is a word that is complicated, and I don't really like to use it, but well, it is what it is. And in that region, when you go a little bit far from the center, for example, in Sumy region, right, you talk to people. And I remember this one report that I did. I was in one of the cities that was occupied for 1 month by the Russian army. Then it was deoccupied. And I remember talking to people about all that period, and people were so happy. You would look at them, everybody seemed normal, everybody seemed really, really happy and trying to reconstruct everything. But once you could spend a little more time with that people, once you could ask some more questions, you would see how devastating it is and how this war is going to affect Ukrainian people for a really, really long time. Because apparently everything is okay, because so you live in a city where it was really, really bad, but then they left and perfect party, let's go reconstruct everything. But the psychological part of all this, it's going to take generations to overcome. But sorry, I'm running away from the question that you asked. So yeah, different regions, different completely different approaches, completely different people as well. But one thing that all Ukrainians have in common is when you go somewhere and you do a report in somebody's house, you never leave their house without something. Like, they can give you a bag of biscuits, they can give you a bag of fruit, they will make you eat something always or drink something, even though they have like very, very little, or they have just been bombed or something like that. So that's a very interesting behavioral whatever experience that most of the journalists have in Ukraine. In Donbass region, for example, to work there is to leave the war, because in Odessa the war is distant. Even in Mykolaiv, that is shelled every day, the war is distant. When you go to the places like Kharkiv and Sumy or Kiev, the war is distant as well. You see its presence, you see its marks, but it's distant. But in Donbass, you live the war. You are part of it, and people that are there with you, they are also part of the scenario of the war, and it's really hard to explain because you sleep with the bombings, right? You can feel it in your lungs. You can feel the bombs falling. You can hear the tanks. The tanks shooting against the Russian parts, and you start to understand what is which ones are going out and which ones are coming in. So you feel like you really are part of the scenario. And the weird thing about Donbass is that for those people who live there, well, it's not new, right? Because they already have the war since 2014, so they really are used to live in that scenario. And it's really, really sad to understand that, because I remember watching children walking and riding their bikes right next to tanks, and it's normal there, right? But it's not normal. Nobody should live like that. Nobody should grow up in a scenario like that. And I also don't understand how, like, parents can live knowing that their children are just right next to the tanks. But it's not a majority. Obviously, most of the families left those areas when the war started, but you have the social problematic families who stay there. And right now, the Ukrainian government has no chance to guarantee the security of those children, right? So the social security of Ukraine cannot go there and take everybody out. It's a very, very complicated situation.
Thank you. And I have to say, you really paint a picture with words. I'll pass it on to Spring. Spring, go ahead.
Olá, Iryna, boa tarde. It's a pleasure to have you here with us.
Olá.
Had the privilege of following your work in the Portuguese TV and the humanity that you put in all of your work. We were lucky enough in Portugal, I think, to watch the war from a human perspective. That is why I think it's so important to have you here with us today. My first question is, it's not easy to watch human suffering every day. Probably you had very difficult days that you deal with your emotions. How do you deal to overcome those days?
Okay, Spring, thank you very much for your kind words. I feel a little bit embarrassed, but thank you very much. And about your question, how to deal with the complicated days, how to deal with all those emotions, when you are in a scenario like that, and especially when you are not obliged, right? Nobody ever came to me and said you need to go there. No, it was always my decision to go to places. If I wanted to go to Ukraine and stay always in Kiev, not to go to other places, I could do that. But it has always been my decision to go to those places. Obviously, with the conversation and the okay of my colleague that's with me, it's really, really important to work as a team. When you are in a scenario like that, you need to be completely sure that you trust the other person and that you work as one. And I was always really lucky to have that with my colleagues. And before I came back to Ukraine the second time, I thought that it was going to be harder to deal with those kind of emotions because of the images that were coming out from Bucha and all of that. I thought that it was going to really mess with my head. But I knew what I was doing there. I knew that I was going there to work. I knew what was my purpose, and I focused on that. I always had my mind very clearly synchronized and focused on what I was supposed to do there. I was supposed to tell the stories of the people. I was supposed to show what was going on and focus on that and not on me, So you just need to be sure that you are doing the best that you can for the people that are around you and the best that you can for the stories that are around you, for the truth because that's my job as a journalist, is to tell the truth, at least from my perspective, my truth, because I don't believe that journalism is a very objective thing, because in a scenario like that, right, you always choose what to show. it's not that we are not showing the truth, but you only showing one part of the truth, right? Because you have the time counted and you cannot show everything. It's impossible. So you always choose what to show, and it's a great responsibility. And I focus to think about that in the first place. I hope that I answered your question.
Yes, perfectly. You always gave us very calm statements, what was happening, very objective. That was something that we could count on. And something that is pure curiosity of my part was war reporting. It's dangerous, let's say. Have you had any close calls, you and your colleague?
No. We were in dangerous places a lot of times. We felt bombings near us, but fortunately we never suffered from it. We never got injured. We never saw like somebody die in front of us because of a bombing or something like that. We were always lucky in that sense, because a lot of my colleagues, they really witnessed really, really complicated stuff, and some of them died, unfortunately, doing their jobs. But we were really, really lucky, and we never suffered from that. But yes, we felt it. We got scared. We had to leave some places earlier than we thought that we should. And about the part of the, like, what was the worst part for me being there, it was not feeling the bombs or shellings or stuff. It was hearing some of the stories, because you some of the stories are really, really hard, and you put yourself into the other people's shoes, right? And it's very impressive how a human being can overcome so complicated stuff. And how, sorry, I just want to because I remembered that one of the things that marked me most, it was this last time that I was in Ukraine, was probably a room that I was in Trostianets, in Sumy region. It was a very small room where Russians tortured Ukrainian civilians. And it's really haunting to see the blood and the marks of, and you can imagine like human beings being there. And that was very, very impressive, much more impressive than actually being near a bomb that just fell somewhere.
Thank you, Iryna. War is a dreadful place. With that, I will pass to Dom, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Spring. Thank you, Iryna. River, go ahead. Sorry for the long wait.
Oh, it's all good. This has been a really insightful conversation to listen to. So and Spring set me up perfectly. Perfect segue. So if I know war reporters tend to see themselves as their own little community, as observers, but not really part of what's going on around them. Mm-hmm. So can you describe how your community felt once you guys figured out that you were actually part of it, that Russians were targeting members of the press, like the Fox team, that was deliberately targeted outside of Kyiv?
Well, I mean, you understand that you are a part of it, but it really doesn't matter, right? Because once again, you know what you have to do, and you know that you just need to keep on doing that. But one day, it affects you. Obviously, it does. When you think about it, like, okay, so you are not that safe as you might think that you are. You're not. But the thing is, even if you're not a target, you can die anywhere, right? So bombs are falling everywhere. just today in Vinica, right? So many people died and so many people are missing. It was in the middle of the day, in the middle of the center of the city. So you can be a target everywhere, not specifically because of your job. But obviously, when you have that awareness that because of what you are doing, you can die, well, on one side, it makes you a little bit angry, and it makes you to work even harder, because you know that you are on the right side of history. You know that you are doing your job, and that you are doing the best that you can in the middle of a situation like that, and that you are helping in your own way. And I remember in the night that one of our colleagues died in Donbass, in our hotel that in Kramatorsk that we were, and it was a really, really harsh sentiment to know that somebody died. A foreign journalist died because he was saying the truth. He was not targeted, but he died because he was really, really close to the front line. And the ambience of the community is that you need to honor all of your colleagues that pass away, and you just need to do the best that you can, even though you may be killed in the middle of all that. But as a war journalist, you know that it can happen, so you just need to accept it.
And if I can have a short follow-up, how does your community deal with the stress? Do you guys do critical stress debriefings? Do you guys have therapists on call or support groups? Because you guys are in the thick of trauma. How do you keep your head straight?
Well, I can only answer that from my perspective and my colleagues' perspective, right? So I don't know how other companies work, but for us, we don't have any kind of support like that. But we have each other, and as you say, we are a community. So in a place like in Donbass, every journalist is like a brother to you. You know that you can go to anybody who's wearing the press vest and just hug them or talk to them or laugh or make fun, because humor really, really helps in situations like that. And it's really interesting to understand that we can really count on each other, and it makes you more than a community. It makes you feel like a small family, because as a journalist, you don't go by yourself in Ukraine, right? So you have people that help you. You have a producer that is with you. Usually is a local person. And so in my case, it's me, my colleague who is a cameraman and producer, and his assistant or whatever. So there's 4 of us, right? And you become a family. So you talk about everything, you support each other, you hug, you fight, you joke, you make fun, and that's important. So it's important to go to a place like that with somebody that you trust, with somebody that you feel confident enough to do whatever is on your mind, and that you can just be yourself in a critical situation.
Thank you. Do you want to give a shout out to your team so we know who they are?
Oh, of course. That would be perfect. I don't know if they're listening, but my team is Carlos Rosa. It's the cameraman. He was with me for the biggest part of my journey in Ukraine. Also, Rui Duo, who is a cameraman as well. He was in all the wars imaginable in the last 30 years. So he's a very experienced guy. And I would also send a big hug to Yevhen and Valeria, my producers on the ground in Ukraine, who are the best. Thank you for that.
Iryna, how did the war, you said it's the first conflict, actually the first war reporting you've done.
Yeah.
How did that change your attitude to your profession, and did it change you personally, given the fact that you're both of Ukrainian descent, you came from Portugal, you've seen Maidan, not everybody has that, and you've seen this now. How has it changed it?
It made me more critical about my profession. I think a lot about it, really, and it makes me think about how we journalists, how we describe the situation, what we show, all of our mistakes, all of our cliches, because journalism has a lot of cliches, and war journalism is even more common to have a lot of cliches, because first, it's easier, it's more recognizable. The images of older people crying, children that are like crying as well, or hungry, or stuff like that. And these past weeks that I'm back in Portugal on my vacation, I've been thinking about it. How can we improve it? How can we show more than the obvious part, right? So yes, definitely this experience changed my perspective on journalism, and it made me very critical on everything that I see, and everything that I hear. So, and I think it's a good thing, because it makes me grow and wanting to be better, and telling a different kind of stories. And on my personal side, well, it's a complicated question. I'm not sure that I'm really, really ready to answer that. But obviously, yes, it does change you, especially on the part that you don't really have the patience that you used to have with the more mundane and common things. Yeah, but it's maybe some other time, Axel.
It is, war is a great equalizer and also a great crystallizer. It clears the mind for those who survive it. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Iryna. Let's go to Susanna, and then to JJ, and then in 5 minutes we'll be joined by a couple of more of your, shall I say, colleagues, a couple of other war reporters as well. Susanna.
Perfect.
Hi, everyone. Hola, Iryna.
Hola.
Thank you for your kindness. Thank you for your professionalism. Thank you for being here. I actually have a question that I have been thinking about. I'm worried about something, and I would like to know your opinion on this. People tend to adapt to everything. Human beings tend to adapt naturally. And I'm worried that with time passing by, people get used to see these images, hear this news constantly, and that they get used to it, that they don't give them importance anymore. And I would like to know what you think is your role and of your war colleagues, reporters, on this. How can we keep this going in order to people? Do you think you have a role in this? How could you and all of us keep this from being a normal thing, a thing that we get used to, that people get used to, to see and to hear? I would like to know your opinion on this as a war reporter, of course.
Susanna, thank you. And thank you for your question. And if I knew the answer to that question, I would be a millionaire by now, because it's really, really hard to do that. It's really hard because human beings, and right now in the mobile era, right? We are constantly being informed, and it's raining information everywhere about everything, and we don't have attention. We don't have the capacity to pay attention long enough to something, right? So right now, to know how to keep people interested in something, it's not an easy thing. It's really, really complicated. I cannot answer you that question because I think nobody has an answer to that question. I can tell you my personal perspective on that. I think that we need to make people in Ukraine closer to people in Portugal. For me, right? Because I'm a Portuguese reporter with Ukrainian origins, reporting war in Ukraine. So for me, I want to try to, and I tried that before, but right now it's a conscious thing, right? So before I was doing that, not understanding what I was doing, but now I am consciously wanting to show to Portuguese audience that it could be them, that people in Ukraine are just as normal as people in Portugal, right? Because right now we have a clear distinction, right? We have the normal ones who have their normal lives, like people in Portugal or wherever, and then we have the abnormal ones. We have the different populations, the ones that suffer, so it's like a differentiation. And for me, I want to show that those people also have fun. They also have dates and have sex. They are normal people that want to have the same rights as everybody else. So for me, my next the thing that I want to do the next time I go to Ukraine is to show that it's the same. It's the small things that count. The to show. It's hard to explain, but I hope that I could express myself in the best way that for you to understand what I mean, to not to show that many cliches with the cryings and stuff, because it is obvious, because a war is a sad, very sad thing. So obviously there is destruction. Obviously there is crying and there is suffering, but 90% of time, right? It's different. It's not like that. You laugh, people have fun, people think about other stuff. And I really want to show that other side, to make people closer, to make Portugal closer to Ukraine.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
To get Bryce and Guillaume up as well. JJ?
Thanks, Doman. Iryna, I have been listening to this space for a long time, and you are one of the most eloquent and descriptive guests that I have heard here. Your words have such impact. And I'm just wondering if there is a story that stands out for you from these 4.5 months that you would like to share that perhaps hasn't been highlighted in the West enough.
Hi, JJ. Thank you for your kind words, and thank you for the opportunity to highlight some stories. Well, actually, there are so many. It's hard to choose one, but I would like to talk about the missing people, because there are a lot of civilians that were taken by Russians, and Ukrainian government is not doing enough to bring them back. I know it's complicated. I know that they are doing their best, but still, I've talked to some women that lost their husbands. They are not dead, but they are lost because they were taken somewhere. They are not where they were supposed to be, and they are civilians, and they have no information at all about what has happened to them. And I'm really, really sad to know that Ukraine is not providing enough help, information, psychological support, or whatever to these people that really, really need it, because they are in the verge of, well, depressions is obvious, right? But these people really need some more strength, some extra strength to deal with all of this, because after the war, right, these people will stay, and we need healthy, strong people to rebuild the country. So I would really, really would like to stress that maybe we should talk more about it. Maybe we should fight more about these people that were taken for no reasons. It's completely illegal. It's a war crime, right? So maybe we should really talk a bit more about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Iryna. Thank you so much for joining us as part of this eloquent and as descriptive a speaker as we have had on this space, pretty much. And it's wonderful, and it's important, just as you said, to bring the stories, bring the what's actually happening in Ukraine to life, and paint that picture with words.
Okay, so Domen, I just want to thank you and to congratulate you, okay, for this project.
Thank you, Iryna. Please keep in touch. Let's
Always.
make sure that we, whenever you're going back to Ukraine, and as well as if something which you think is absolutely important that it shall be reported and it needs more attention, please feel free to come to us anytime.
Perfect. It's really nice to know that. Thank you.